Hello, welcome to your TED Talk on academia. I decided to do this TED Talk on academia and vulnerability, and I've called it Having the Courage to Say I Don't Know. I was asked to do the TED Talk by one of my colleagues, and I was trying to think of something really innovative and creative to do, and I just kept coming back to this idea of vulnerability and thinking about how it's helped me and how it's helped me on since becoming an academic 3 years ago. And I first came into contact with it with a lady called Brené Brown, and that was probably about 6 years ago now. So I wanted to share with you really my vulnerability story, as it were, and also share some of the reasons why I believe in it and why I believe it's important that we practice this in academia. So the quote here is, "Vulnerability is not a weakness, and that myth is profoundly dangerous. Vulnerability is a birthplace of innovation, creativity and change." And in a job where we're constantly asked to be innovative, constantly asked to be creative and constantly changing, I think it's something that we need to invest in and think about. So my journey with vulnerability, well, it started off about 6 years ago when I was an NHS service manager, and I was that little zebra there, and I was losing my stripes and putting it down to stress. I was in a job role that I was new into, and I was managing a multidisciplinary team of OTs, physios, nurses and admin staff. And what I found is that nothing I could do was right. It was a really difficult job. Constantly feeling like you're having to protect yourself and almost wear armour. I felt like I was building up armour to protect myself, and each day my armour was getting more and more. My armour was getting heavier and heavier because I felt I had to protect myself. And part of that protecting myself was not really ever letting anyone know when I was unsure or in doubt, and never really asking for help or support. And it got to the point that I was actually getting out of the car each day and I was counting the days down until the weekend. And thinking back on it and reflecting back, I probably had a bit of the imposter syndrome as well, because I was fairly young and I was managing a lot of staff, and obviously multidisciplinary, and some were older than me. So then, just to make matters worse and make people just dislike me that little bit more, I won an award, a leadership award, and this award involved me going to Ohio. It was with Choice Dynamics, and it was a conference on relationship-based care. And it was work that I'd done previous with the district nursing team in Rotherham, and it was something I was really passionate about. But like I say, it didn't really help my situation, because I think people already thought I was a young big shot, and then winning this award probably added to that. So off I went to Ohio. This is where I met Brené. I didn't meet her personally, but I saw her doing a talk, and she did a talk on vulnerability. She's also done a TED Talk. And basically what Brené did is she's done some research, I think about 10 years research on vulnerability, and she links it to leadership. She also links it to parenting and life in general, really. But I'll be using quite a few Brené quotes as I go through this talk. But she says, authenticity is a daily practice of letting go who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. And as she's talking, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about my job back in the NHS as a service manager. And I'm thinking, I'm not being vulnerable. I'm putting on this mask. I'm almost wearing a mask and pretending I'm all right and I've got it all together and I know all the answers. And this armour that I'm wearing, this protective armour, it's actually dragging me down. It's making me feel heavy. It's making things a lot harder. So after listening to Brené and listening to her talk, I almost felt like she was speaking to me, and I thought about how I was managing and dealing with things back in England as an NHS service manager. So off I went back to England, and the first thing I did was I got all my team together and I explained to them that I was struggling, that I needed their support, that I needed their help. And the one common thing that we all had that we wanted was better patient care. And I admitted to them that I was struggling and that I didn't have all the answers, but between us all, we did. And I actually got a little bit tearful, got a little tear in my eye as I was telling them this, because it felt very emotional and I'd built it up over quite a long period of time. And I was band 7 at the time, and this was to my sort of senior leadership team. These had about 5 band 6s working with me, so it was with them. And quite a few came up to me after and said, "Oh, really sorry, we didn't understand what pressure you're under. We want to help you. What can we do to support you?" And their approach changed. Because I changed towards them, they changed towards me and became much more supportive and much more solution focused and much more empowered, really, and wanting to help and support me, which made life a heck of a lot easier. So that little bit of vulnerability that I showed to them actually helped them empathise with me and understand where I was coming from and the pressures I was under. So then things were obviously on track as a service manager, but it was never something that I was akin to. And then an opportunity came up to work at Sheffield Hallam. And I had all the negative thoughts. I'm not good enough. They won't want me. And I'm not academic. Whatever that means. Didn't think I was academic enough to work at university. But then I remembered Brené, and Brené's words came springing into my mind. And it's worse to spend your life on the outside looking in, wondering what if, than it is to try and dare greatly and risk the chance of failure. Dare greatly, get in the arena and try. So I got in the arena, I applied, and I actually got the job. Hence why I'm here speaking to you today. So, beginning my journey of academia and vulnerability. So, this is what I thought my road was going to look like. I was feeling great. I'd got the job of my dreams. I was imagining this beautiful, wonderful horizon, sunset ahead. It was going to, it's just going to be wonderful. And in reality, it was this. Lots of ups and downs, lots of twists and turns, lots more uncertainty, lots more vulnerability. So, I wanted the straight road, but in reality it was this winding, twisting, ever-changing road. So, what do I mean by being vulnerable? So, it's not really a term that we often use with ourselves, particularly working in healthcare. It is more a term that we use with patients or somebody we see as quite weak and frail and vulnerable. Weak, it implies, the automatic thing you think about vulnerability is a weakness. But it's asking for help and support and saying I don't know. It's getting feedback, so that's a very vulnerable place you can put yourself in, where you're actually asking people. Remember when I first started with my lectures, and obviously with Brené sitting on my shoulder, at the end of all my sessions I used to get all the students to write on a post-it note how they'd found the session. And whilst I was anxious to know what they would write, it helped, and it helped me progress, and it helped my confidence. Another example is you sat in a meeting and you don't understand. Say, I don't understand. All these are very small but significant acts of vulnerability. So what I thought it was important to do is we can't confuse vulnerability with oversharing. And Brené Brown talks a lot about this in her book, Daring Greatly. So examples you might see, we call it TMI, don't we? Too much information. So say if somebody's got to go off work sick because they've had a sickness bug, they'd send an email out to the whole team and go into great detail about how they've been up all through the night with sickness and diarrhea, and they couldn't possibly come into work because they're going to be infectious, when in reality all they needed to do was say, I won't be in work today because I'm unwell. So there is a difference, and it's important not to confuse vulnerability with oversharing. So how vulnerable do we feel when you teach? When we're stood there on our own with all these faces staring at us, she says, as she does it. That spot right there is, I feel, sometimes the most vulnerable spot. You're out there and you're on your own. And it can be and feel like a very, very vulnerable place to be. And it's important that you acknowledge and accept that and own that. If you try and suppress it, it's just going to make it worse. So my question is do you think showing some vulnerability would help students connect with you? Do you think that element of being a normal, a human being with feelings and emotions helps with that connection? Well, I think it does. I'll give a quick example of where I think it's helped. I'd been off work for 1.5 years on maternity leave, and on my first day back I got a phone call from one of my colleagues. Someone's called in sick and I'm going to have to cover their session. So got Rose in the car, my little girl, and driving to work. It's the first time I'd taken her to work. Obviously I had all the worry about dropping her at nursery. Left her at nursery screaming and crying and, mortified that I'd left her. And I had to walk into a lecture theatre covering a session that I hadn't set and hadn't seen at all. It wasn't my session. So walked in feeling very anxious. So one of the first things I said to the students is, obviously I'm covering this session today. Please bear with me. I'll do the best that I can for you. It is my first day back after 1.5 years maternity, and I have just left my little girl very upset at nursery. I thought it was important that they knew that. I didn't want them to misread my nerves or my anxiety as anything else. As me being unapproachable or as me being uptight or, I didn't want them to misread any of my anxiety symptoms. I'm really glad I did that because it resonated particularly with one student, and she actually emailed me and said she found the fact that I found out you had a young child like me, that you know the area where I'm from well, and it made me feel connected to you because you knew you could relate to my situation. So she really as I remember saying it, and she was looking at me and nodding her head because she'd just left her little boy at the nursery as well. And I think it helps student realise that it makes them connect with us. It makes us see us as human beings, and we're not just this robot there to sort of absorb and give them information and knowledge. So what do we need to be vulnerable? We need to feel safe and supported. Can't be working in a blame culture. If we're working in a blame culture, people aren't going to be vulnerable. We need to have positive working relationships with colleagues. We need to have good confidence, high self-esteem and good self-worth. Without all that, it's very hard for people to be vulnerable. So my question is, if your armour is stopping you being vulnerable, how will you start to remove your armour and start to be vulnerable, and how will you dare greatly? And what Brené talks a lot about stepping into the arena, so almost like a gladiator. So I'm not talking about removing your armour completely, because that would just be silly. That would be risky. But the gladiator's still got some armour on, but you've taken some off, and what's it going to take to get there? And I'll end with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. So it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have been done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, but there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, whose great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. Thank you.